But when we think about plants, they are utterly fundamental to life on Earth.
Hi, welcome to Nature Magic. Today I'm speaking to Dr. Karen Bacon. Karen is a plant ecologist and palaeoecologist based in Botany and Plant Sciences at the National University of Ireland, Galway. Karen's interests focus on invasive species, plant chemistry, ecosystem services, and plant blindness. We talk about what people can do to fight the biodiversity crisis, and Karen kindly sent on some questions after the interview to ask your local politicians when they come knocking. I will put them in the show notes so that you can print them off and stick them up by the front door. So hi, Karen. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You're very, very welcome. Where are you talking to us from today?
Hi, Mary. First of all, thanks for having me. It's great to join you. I'm very happy to be here. I'm coming to you today from home in Loughrea, so still working from home at the moment, but it's a beautiful day, so can't complain.
Yes, so we'll try not to keep you inside, locked in front of the computer for too long. Can you tell us your background? I know you're a nature lover, and what have you been doing? You've recently started in the university in Galway.
Yeah, so I'm a plant scientist, and I did my degree and my PhD in University College Dublin quite a long time ago now, and I've then worked in the UK for a long time. I've been in the University of Leeds for I think it was about 6 years, just before I moved to NUI Galway in 2019. So my research is very broad. It includes elements of palaeobotany and also modern ecology, everything kind of from invasive species to how people engage with plants, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on, and also looking at how plants are dealing with current climate threats and risks of extinction, both in the modern world and in the fossil record.
Yeah, so for people who don't know the term, so palaeobotany is botany in the fossil record, is that correct?
That's right, yeah. So it's just fossil plants. So when we say paleo, people immediately often think of dinosaurs, which is a type of plant blindness, which we can talk about as well. And so people always think about dinosaurs when you say paleo, but my area is the fossil plants. So the things some of the dinosaurs were eating.
Yes, so one of Karen's particular topics that she's written some wonderful articles about is the subject of plant blindness, which I'll let Karen explain, and also the theory that name plant blindness is a little confusing for people, and maybe there are some other suggestions.
Yes, so the term plant blindness was first brought in kind of the late 1990s, around that kind of time. And what it refers to is a form of cognitive bias. So where people don't really see plants in the same way that they see animals in particular. So it's like you consign plants to background. I show students every year some photographs, and I show them they're not very good. And I still say to them, what's in the photograph? And every year I'm told, I can't really see what's in it. I think it might be some sort of a dragonfly. And it's like, yeah, okay, it might be. What about this one? Well, that's an out of focus bumblebee, I think. And what about this one? I think they might be sparrows. They're all really terrible photographs of animals, but they're quite good photographs of the plants. Say, actually, it's a bramble, or it's a garden, it's a piece of grass. And the students immediately are looking for the animal in the picture. And we've done this kind of with members of the public as well on outreach days, and it's the same. So that's the clear-cut example of what plant blindness is. It is not seeing the plants. It is putting them in the background and thinking there must be something else there, or just walking by them and not paying any attention, not really seeing them. But if you saw, say if you're going through a park somewhere, you might think it's a very nice park and you're having a nice walk. You're not noticing the plants, but if a squirrel ran by, you go, oh, I saw a squirrel in the park today. Not I saw these plants or this tree or anything. It's I saw the animal. So it's putting plants in the background.
Yes, we do. Well, we haven't done it for a while now, but Frisky, our Burren feral goat, used to do the Frisky herb walk. And really, the good thing about it was we'd go around and see what herbs Frisky wanted to eat. But basically, she'd just stop and start eating something. So you all had to stop. And eventually, everybody would look down and go, "Oh, dandelion." And then you'd start talking about the dandelion, but it's literally the fact that she'd stopped you there and you couldn't move any further and you had to look at the plant. So she was quite useful in that respect. But I totally agree. Every single time I go around the nature walk with somebody, I find a new plant that I've walked past. For instance, you came recently and you pointed out the enchantress's nightshade.
Yes.
I had never spotted it before. So it's even the people who love plants, it's a problem.
I do, yes, and I think that is maybe a little bit of it, but I do think plants do make us work a little bit harder for it as well, you know. So they are generally they're not going to move around in the same way that an animal will. They're maybe particularly a lot of our native flora, not all of it, but a lot of it is quite diminutive, you know. So you kind of have to want to see it. You have to be engaged, I think, to see it. And it's not that people are disconnected from it. It's just that, you know, our lives are really busy and they're just put to the background, and it's just not something that people see immediately. But it is something that it is a little bit of a problem though, because when we start to think about, you know, how decisions are made, how different things are protected, even on, you know, the kind of higher level of government funding, where money goes, it goes to things that people care about, and people care about things they know about and they understand. So that puts plants down quite a bit further. And particularly when we're starting to think about things like our native plants, you know, you might say people thinking about crops or stuff like that maybe is a higher priority, which is fine, but we're not necessarily thinking about, you know, our small native plants like the enchantress nightshade or hoary willow herb, or these kind of plants, because we're just not even maybe aware that they're there most of the time.
I mean, I want to ask you in a minute why are plants important, which is a big question. But I was just remembering walking down the Burren with you the other day, and on our left-hand side we've got the meadow, which all the local farmers think we're cracked because we don't, you know, cut it until the end of September, and it's full of yellow rattle, which isn't good for hay, and it's absolutely bursting with biodiversity. And if you look over the other wall, there is a very good farmer's field, which is monoculture ryegrass, and there isn't a native plant in sight, and that's just from pure management, and how simply all those plants can disappear by one application of nitrogen, and they're gone. And they're gone in most places. Why do we need to keep this biodiversity?
It's so important. And I think that being in the meadow with you recently, it was amazing. It was the most beautiful meadow I've ever been in, and so biodiverse, just absolutely incredible. I could still be there. And everything in the natural world is connected. You can't pull a piece out and then still expect to have all of the things that you place a value on. Everything is connected together. So when we are talking about biodiversity, we're talking about plants, our animals, our fungi, you know, the whole thing. My area obviously is plants. That's the bit that I'm interested in. If you want to have terrestrial ecosystems, so things like forests and peatlands and all the life that we have on land, you have to have plants. If you want to have quite a lot of the food crops that we grow globally are pollinated. If you want to have those pollinators, you need to have the plants that they've evolved with, their native plants. So we need our native plants to help the pollinators. We need our native plants that are maybe not as useful to pollinators, because it's also important not just to place plants as only a service provider. It's not just there because we'll keep that species because it's important to a pollinator. That's not how it works. those species are also found in a community, a plant community, in particular areas that have other species that will fill other niches, have other roles to help that ecosystem be healthy and thriving. So it all builds together. If we want a healthy planet, we need to have healthy ecosystems. If we want healthy ecosystems, we need to have biodiverse ecosystems. And if we want biodiverse ecosystems, that starts with the plants.
I think that's a very clear message, and hopefully that'll be able to connect in people's minds why this is so important, because it's really the it's not even education, it's an understanding that isn't there. You know, you look at a lovely field of green grass, well, that's lovely, you can make hay and feed the cows and everything. Well, the flowers are pretty, but you know, hey, what's the point? It's a difficult topic, isn't it? So really, one of the things in your article which I really loved is trying to rename plant blindness, and the best one I think people have come up with is plant awareness, because at least people understand what that means. Because if you say plant blindness, people go, yes, what exactly is that? Whereas plant awareness, they go, okay, we need to be aware of plants.
Yeah, and I think we had quite a conversation about this. So when I started getting interested in this topic a couple of years ago, there was also an academic discussion going on around the term plant blindness. And it's, on one hand, so the responses that I've seen in various different platforms online have gone from the very kind of funny, with people tweeting back, like, I didn't think any of them had eyes, to the really serious, which is that it can be viewed as a disability metaphor. And, you know, we don't want to exclude people. Obviously, no one that, you know, I've spoken to in the scientific community wants that. We want it to be inclusive. And the other thing is that the term is, it's important to have a term that people can engage with and can understand. Now, I do have to say plant blindness is a good conversation starter, because people go, what? And you can start talking about it, but I'm increasingly uncomfortable with it, having spoken to people who view it as a disability metaphor, and I don't think that's the way forward.
Yeah.
So when we had that meeting, and we had a good discussion around this, one of the terms that has been suggested was deemed very, very academic, and it's hard enough to engage people without kind of loading up on, you have to explain every word in a phrase.
Am I going to fail?
But it's a really good conversation starter, because you can then say, well, you know, I bet you can tell me 10 plants, and most people can. But then if I'm running the quiz that we have run on several occasions, I might say, can you tell me these 10? And most people can't get all 10. So it's a good conversation starter. But more importantly, I think it says exactly what we want. So it says, are you plant aware? How plant aware are you? And it's immediately getting people to think about it. It's immediately getting people to question themselves, like, do I know any plants? And it's either I know loads of plants, or do I know any at all? And you definitely do know some. So I think we're, you know, it's a conversation that's kind of going on at the moment, but I think it's a good suggestion, and I think it's a more inclusive term as well, which is
I do. I mean, you could say things like, do you want to top up your plant awareness? Which isn't maybe as intimidating as how plant aware are you? Are you zero? But it's so true, because talking to the National Parks and Wildlife guides up at the Burren National Park, I mean, they have a range of people. Some people don't know what a dandelion is, but they're genuinely interested.
Yeah, and I have to say that stunned me when I started doing this. And one of the plants we show is a dandelion, and there are more people than I would have expected who really weren't sure. But, you know, the bottom line is that they go away, they do know, and then, you know, dandelion is such a fabulous plant as well to initiate plant conversations on, because everyone will tell you it's a weed, which is another term I have a bit of a problem with, and you can then talk about all of the stuff that dandelions can do. You know, they were used to make tea. They're really good for pollinators. They're really important for, our local biodiversity. They're very beautiful. There's some parts of the world where people are looking to get them as exotic plants because of their seed head, which I was also stunned to discover as well. You just don't think about that with dandelions. But they're a fabulous plant to talk to people about as well, because again, they're a kind of charismatic in a very odd way, because so many people really don't like them. So you can talk to them about why they're really actually quite cool, which I enjoy.
Yeah, so it triggers people when they're trying to get them out of their drives and things like that. Yeah, but it's the stories behind the plants, I think, that's going to sell plants to people. And maybe plant awareness isn't quite catchy enough. It's definitely the top one that I've heard, but I'm not sure if we can come up with another catchier kind of a thing, but let's go with plant awareness for the time being anyway. You are a plant lover, and I always ask people to talk about some plant or animal they're particularly fond of, so go for it.
So I could pick so many, but the palaeobotanist in me always goes to Gingo Biloba, which is a fabulous species of non-flowering, so gymnosperm tree. So what that means is that it produces a seed, but it doesn't produce a flower. And gymnosperms, that people would be more aware of, the Christmas tree. Okay, so that's a gymnosperm. So ginkgo is not very closely related, but it is an absolutely fascinating plant. They are in the fossil record for well over 250 million years. So they preceded the dinosaurs and outlasted them as well. And they have these really beautiful leaves that are usually two-lobed. So that's where the biloba name comes from. They can be fan-shaped as well, depending. But they're a really noticeable, beautiful leaf. And they're very interesting because they were a very long time ago, hundreds of millions of years ago, they're very common in the fossil record. And then they start to become less and less. And around the time that the angiosperms, so the flowering plants, evolve and start to become dominant in the fossil record, we see the ginkgos start to become less and less common. So they were likely outcompeted by the angiosperms. But there was a relict population in in East Asia, and they're found often near Buddhist temples. So no one's really sure if they were fully relict, fully natural populations that just happened to survive, or they were tended by the Buddhist monks. And there are some just beautiful examples of them. But nowadays, they've kind of had a bit of a resurgence, and they're very common in the Northern Hemisphere as a street tree because they're quite resistant to pollution. And you see them in North America, Europe, Asia, everywhere. And they survive quite well in cities. But they also have, they'll drop all of their leaves. They turn yellow and drop their leaves, and the leaves will drop almost synchronously overnight in a particular area. So there's just suddenly a carpet of ginkgo leaves. So they're really, really beautiful plant. They also used herbally, so there's some medicinal properties in them, and they're used in tea. And I've had ginkgo tea. It's quite odd, but they're really, really, really interesting plant. The other thing that's quite interesting about them is the vast majority of the ones that you would see today are male. And the reason for that is that the female fruit is excessively pungent. So because the plants were selected to be planted in the cities, generally speaking, they're male plants which don't have a very strong smell associated with them. But there's plenty of them in Ireland. We have some in NUI Galway. There's this beautiful one in the Botanic Gardens in Dublin. So they're around, and once you start to notice them, you kind of see them very clearly because of their really distinct leaf shape. So that's my favourite plant.
Yeah, they're beautiful leaves. We'll put some pictures up on Instagram, and hopefully everybody will learn the ginkgo tree. And we might have the monks to thank for them growing today then.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a beautiful story. What positive actions would you like people to do to help support nature?
So I think there's lots that people can do. And I think that kind of tying in plant awareness with that, what I would really like to see is people taking a little bit more interest in our native flora. So particularly if you have a garden, maybe seeing what would grow there if in a small area of it, seeing what might grow there if you weren't planting it or managing it very heavily, and not maybe considering everything that pops up to be a weed. So we have some really beautiful native plants, but we obviously don't see them in very often in garden centre. Things like Enchantress's Nightshade, hoary willow herb, these things that will grow quite easily in many areas. So I think that would be quite positive.
Just on that, I did notice on Facebook a garden show in England, and I can't remember the name, but I'll find it. The weed garden won the overall gold in the last couple of weeks. Yes.
Oh, that's amazing. I missed that. That's really cool. There's so much really beautiful, just native stuff. So I think that would be something that I think it would be nice to see people, kind of engage a little bit with the native flora as well as other plants, obviously. The other thing then I think is, if you don't have a garden, I haven't had a garden for many, many years, but have a window box or some pots. It will bring you joy as well, apart from anything else. It really does. The other aspect then is, when people are looking to be elected, tell them this is a priority for you. Ask them what they want to encourage in terms of biodiversity, how they're going to fund it, how they're going to support our native ecosystems, how important it is in their list of priorities, and make it an issue. Because I think there is movement on this, but it really will only come really from the people. If people are really interested in this, I think that's where it needs to go in order to really help protect our environments.
Well, I will take a list of questions off you at the end, and I'll put them in the show notes for people, because I think if they actually have the questions rather than sort of, are you support biodiversity, but if you can actually say, how are you going to fund it? What are you going to do? We'll put them in the show notes. So that's a really,
cool,
yeah, good point. Have you a couple of nature books you'd like to recommend for us?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this, and one of the books that really struck me a long time ago was A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson, and I just loved that. The descriptions in that book of walking through the Alpatchians in North America are amazing. A place that I've never been, and I feel like I could recognize it from having read his book. So I love that. And the other one is Zoe Devlin's The Wildflowers of Ireland. It's my absolute favorite. Now, obviously, I use that as well in teaching and in work, but it is just the most fabulous way to connect with our native wildflowers. So if anyone is interested in that, that will be where I would recommend they start. It is a really accessible, really easy, really accurate, and just beautifully presented and written book. And yeah, I love it. I think it's brilliant.
It is. It's a lovely book. I'm so glad it's on our book list, and I want to get the whole book list together now and post it somewhere, because the books that have been recommended by people are just fabulous. So thank you. 2 great choices. Now you've got that magic wand. What are you going to do for the planet? You've only 5 minutes. Quick.
Yeah, I still don't know. I think I think I've probably got 2 answers to this. One is to try and get people to engage with plants a little bit more. But I think the other one is just maybe to give people the opportunity. If I could give people anything, it would be the gift of taking a second before you speak, before you respond. Take a second, be a little bit kinder. And I think that would be my my wish for the world, because I think so much around just discussions nowadays is so hot and heavy and gets out of hand so quickly. And I think just to lower the temperature a little bit would be good.
I think that's absolutely lovely. That actually gave me shivers, and it's sort of also given me a little bit of a nudge, because Twitter is so tempting. When you see something, it's so tempting. You just want to answer, "No, you're wrong. You're wrong." So
I had to walk away twice yesterday.
So when I'm on Twitter, I'm going to think of you, Karen. I take a minute and be kind. So what a lovely, lovely thing to finish up with. And do you have any way you'd like to point people to, website-wise, or to the university, or anything else you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's the NUI Galway's website is really good. So, yeah, check it out. And
what can you say about the botany department? Obviously, you dived in at totally the wrong moment when everything shut down instantly. It wasn't your fault. There was a pandemic. But now everything's opening up.
It's fabulous. I have been so thrilled I'm very privileged to have been able to come home and essentially pick where I wanted to work. That is rare in academia, so I do feel intensely privileged that that has happened. It was wonderful to be able to come home, even if seeing family and friends hasn't worked out so far, but it will. And my colleagues are just wonderful. It's been great, and I think we've a lot of exciting plans. I think the future is bright, hopefully, and yeah, it's been brilliant. It's a lovely place to work. My colleagues are super. The students are great. You couldn't ask for more, really, to be honest. So yeah, it's all good.
That's great. And you're thinking of developing the herbarium possibly in the future, and different projects.
Yeah, so we're working towards that, and we're trying to look at ways to increase sample size. We're looking at storage and stuff like that at the moment on a very practical level, but on an aspirational level, I would hope that in the next few years we have a really effective, active and growing herbaria for the west of Ireland in particular, but because we will be in the herbarium in the west of Ireland, but also as a national and international resource over the next few years. That's kind of what we're working towards.
Yeah, great. And we're going to do some more seed collecting at Burren Nature Sanctuary. And there's been a lot of interest from people to volunteer. So that might be one way of getting people more plant aware. Mm-hmm. And when they have to look to see which plant it is, maybe take a herbarium sample and help do the seed collecting. And there's a purpose behind it for the National Seed Bank. So we'll work together trying to raise awareness for plants.
Yeah. So yeah, and we're looking forward to getting involved in all that as well. So it's great.
It's good. Thank you so much, Karen, for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Nature Magic podcast. The news this week is that Burren Nature Sanctuary is now closed again due to a COVID-19 close contact. COVID, the gift that keeps giving. Anyway, keep an eye on our Facebook and Instagram for updates. Please review the podcast, as it really helps with our reach and our mission to be a positive voice for nature.